Morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to today's Candidates Conversation in Luzerne County. I am Marvetta Coleman, and I'm with the Children Matter Action Fund. The Children Matter Action Fund was formed earlier this year to really focus on helping citizens to connect with lawmakers on critical issues that are affecting children across the Commonwealth. We support the Start Strong Pennsylvania or the Start Strong PA campaign, the Pre-K for PA, and the Childhood Begins at Home campaigns. This is the 8th of several conversations that we are holding across the state, and we are just so pleased that not only our candidates and our program participants, but our audience is joining us this morning. We know that this is an issue that is important for all our children, not just for the immediate time, but certainly for a time looking forward, as we have found that the importance of childcare and early learning education cannot be underestimated. We invite you to ask questions in the chat box, and as time permits, we will try to integrate them. I want to let you know that all candidates for House Districts 119 and 120 were invited to participate. We do know that this is a very busy time, and as such, sometimes schedules don't allow for full participation in everything that invitations are received for. We do encourage you to visit our website. It is childrenmatteractionfund.org. We issued surveys, and we also asked candidates to consider becoming a champion for children with our Children Matter Action Fund pledge. So information can be found there with respect to the responses that we've received. And we just are looking forward to a really robust conversation this morning. We're so pleased to welcome our moderator of the morning, Zubeen Saeed, who is president and CEO of the Building Blocks Learning Center. The Building Blocks Learning Center was established in 2001. They serve 81 students in the Pre-K Counts program. And Zubeen also is a member of the Wilkes-Barre. And I know that I've been told that it's pronounced different ways, so I will probably get corrected. But in any event, the Chamber Board, as well as the Career and Technical School Early Childhood Education Board. So we're going to step right into our program, and I am turning it over to our moderator of the morning. Good morning, Zubeen. And you're on mute.
Okay, good morning. How are you?
Very good, very good.
No, I wanted to just take a moment to say thank you and the Children Matter Action Fund for the introduction and giving me this opportunity to moderate and host this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little bit of why this is so important to me. I've been in the early childhood field for the past 25 years as a business leader and as an educator, and I've personally seen the evolution of this industry. When I started out back in the day, it was a glorified babysitting service, and then over the years, it then became a trendy thing for parents to enroll in. But today the early education field is fundamentally a necessity for a child's development and for a family's survival. And I think leaders in today's day and time have the responsibility to not only bring awareness to the early childhood industry, but to take an active role to solidify the industry as the foundation of our community. So with that being said, I am excited to welcome 2 leaders from our community to join our virtual table conversation. From District 120, I'd like to introduce Representative Erin Kaufer. So welcome, thank you for joining us this morning. And I'd like to welcome Joanna Bryn Smith, also from District 120. So thank you for joining us this morning. The other candidates, or not candidates, sorry, the other participants that will be joining us in our conversation, they're grass top leaders from our community. I'd like to welcome Lindsay Griffin, the Vice President of the Greater Wilkes-Barre Chamber. So good morning, Lindsay. I'd like to introduce Ginny Crake, who is the President of the Junior Achievement of Northeastern Pennsylvania. So good morning, Ginny. Also, Dr. Amy Hnasko, who is the Assistant Professor of Wilkes University. So thank you for joining us. And I'd like to formally also welcome Wico van Genderen, who will be sharing his opening thoughts on how important early education is in our industry. He is the President and CEO of the Wilkes-Barre Chamber of Commerce. So Wico, thank you for sharing what your thoughts are and starting our conversation.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Zubeen, for that introduction and for including me as part of this important forum. I am delighted to be here this morning representing not only the Wilkes-Barre Chamber, but also as a Pennsylvania member of a bipartisan nonprofit group called Ready Nation. And Ready Nation is a national network of more than 2,700 business executives from across the nation working to promote public policies and programs that build a stronger workforce and economy. And you know, with that goal in mind, today's forum on early care and education is particularly relevant. Early care and education opportunities for working families are an increasingly important issue for the business community. These opportunities are a critical support for the current workforce, as well as an important part of the pipeline to a successful future workforce. The skills that every future job and career will need, teamwork, empathy, resiliency, are all shaped by quality educational experiences early in life. When kids are in quality early care and education, like those provided by Building Blocks, they're building the skills that matter the most. Early childhood brain development demands stimulation, enrichment, and interaction with caring adults. And those connections are built into the early years of development support, mental and social and emotional functions for life. Investments in high quality childcare and pre-K pay off when children enter school ready to succeed. They're more likely to stay on track academically, graduate from high school, pursue higher education and career training, and become more productive workers and contributors to our future economy. Additionally, with more than 2/3 of the nation's children under the age of 6 having parents in the labor force, childcare and early education programs are also a critical support for the present-day workforce. You know, prior to COVID-19, our state and nation already faced a child care crisis. This was a crisis around access for families finding care, with more than half, 57% of Pennsylvanians living in a child care desert with poor access to finding care. And affordability, you know that high quality child care costs are almost as high as in-state public college tuition. And quality. You know, only 39% of all children, child care in Pennsylvania currently meets high quality standards. You know, here, of course, in Luzerne County, we're fortunate to have Zubeen in Building Blocks and Lynn at Head Start, but we need more Building Blocks and more Head Starts to accommodate demand that's exceeding supply. You know, the COVID-19 public crisis has put an immense strain on an already fragile child care sector. Right now, as many Americans transition back to work, child care providers are facing enrollment issues, costlier health and safety protocols, and new teacher training requirements. This very well may put a substantial percentage of them out of business permanently, increasing the lack of child care options for families. And when parents do not have reliable, affordable, quality childcare, their workers suffer, their productivity plummets, and they have difficulty advancing in their careers. There will be no economic recovery if the childcare industry is not healthy and stable. And our nation's long-term well-being depends on a childcare infrastructure that works for every family in America. You know, as we think about all these things at the federal, state, and local levels that need to do to reopen our businesses and restart our economy, protecting and supporting the entire child care and early learning sector will be absolutely fundamental to the success of those efforts in both the short term and in the long term. And I want to thank you again for letting me be part of this important conversation. I'm going to turn it back to Zubeen to begin the discussion with the candidates.
Thank you, Wico, and thank you for framing our conversation and setting the stage today. So thank you for just sharing all that information. As we go into the questions, our Grass Top leaders will ask a series of questions to our candidates. Each candidate will have about 2 minutes to kind of respond to the question. Please note that Marvetta will be our timekeeper, so she will be alerting you when you have about 30 seconds left. So make sure you're keeping an eye on that. Jen Schwartz, who's also joining us from Panacea, will be monitoring the chat box. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts they would like to share, please don't hesitate to send them in. And time permitting, I will definitely be able to ask candidates that. So to start off, Ginny, why don't you share a little bit of why you think early childhood education is relevant and important, and lead into our first question.
As beautiful as this is in timing, I have a street sweeper coming right down my block. So if it gets loud, I'm just going to talk louder, all right? Oh my goodness. So I'm Ginny. I'm the president of Junior Achievement, and I've been, can you hear it? Okay, we're good. I've been the leader of Junior Achievement for about 18 months now. And prior to that, I was a part of the United Way, both in Berwick and in Wyoming Valley. And I've had a series of very important conversations around the need for quality and affordable early childhood care and education. I remember being out on the campaign trail for United Way saying, like, you know how critical it is, those first 5 years of how much brain development takes place in those first 5 years, and how it was so important to educate grandparents and parents and pediatricians to make sure that that playtime, those conversations, the music that we listen to at a very early age is established and important and a priority. So I've often had to be the spokesperson for that type of messaging around my community, as well as the critical points of third grade reading levels, where if our schools and our students are going to be successful, we know that all third graders have to read by third grade. And because prior to third grade, you're learning how to read, and after third grade, you're reading to learn. And so the farther behind you get after third grade, the harder it is to catch up. So it is one of those critical points in all of our children's lives to be well prepared in the early years. So as my role with Junior Achievement now, we talk about money and we talk about careers in kindergarten. And people are often shocked about that. They think, why? But as most things, the earlier you learn and the earlier you're comfortable with these conversations, the better off you are. And so when we talk about money, we talk about saving, we talk about spending, we talk about visible money and invisible money, as well as careers, and how there are so many more careers than what maybe a typical kindergartner would have thought, which is probably a veterinarian and a teacher, right? That's what they always say. What do you want to be when you grow up? Those are the things that they say, but we know that they need to be exposed to a far greater variety of careers so that they can be thinking about their own skill sets and their own progress. We find in our organization that 4th and 5th graders that attend JA BizTown have already an awareness of their skill set. So they already know if they're going to be interacting with people in their future, or if they're going to maybe be in the back office if they prefer to be more introverted. And you can already assess what careers would fit those skill sets at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate the time on the panel. So I share the love for this topic and would certainly champion this message any chance I get, because of how critical it is to our future workforce, like Wico was saying, and our family stability. So thank you.
Okay, I can lead into the first question. COVID-19 has a significant impact on early care and education providers, and also has exposed the fragility of childcare systems. While many programs have reopened, there are those that have closed and still others that are considering whether they can reopen. Addressing the impact of COVID-19 on the infrastructure of early childcare and education is critical to families and businesses and the state's overall operations and economy. as it relates to the thousands of employees who depend on the small businesses. Representative Kaufer, what do you think is important to help families and young children to operate effectively in this environment?
Well, thank you, Zubeen, and thank you, everybody, for being a part of this forum today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. As the son of a first grade and kindergarten teacher who taught for 37 years, I was lucky enough to have almost my own early childhood education at home throughout my time coming up, certainly having somebody interested in the topic. But, right now with what's the topics of COVID-19, I think the biggest issue that you're talking about is making sure people feel safe, making sure the kids feel safe, the parents feel safe dropping off their children. That means, the appropriate standards are put in place for the adequate PPEs that you're talking about, sanitizer, and making sure beyond that, the staff and people there have the right training and knowledge of how to make sure that these procedures are being followed inside of the facilities. And so in order for a parent, in my opinion, to have that comfort level when they drop their child off at home, to know that they're going to be safe in this early childhood environment, they need to have that. So it is a multi-step approach to what we're talking about with the effects of COVID-19. Parents need to know their kids are safe, and workers on top of that also need to know that they're safe, and kids need to be in a good fostering environment for them to grow. So, and I know, Wico, you talked about this a little bit, and Ginny as well, that you have parents who are juggling work, taking care of kids, and then on top of all of that, of course, too, is the issue of pre-existing conditions and those who might even be further at risk, whether they're a parent who might have a pre-existing condition or a grandparent taking care of a child, grandparents raising grandchildren, who are also at risk, afraid for their children to go into this type of environment, either early childhood or a regular school setting in and of itself, as well as, once again, looking at the children themselves and the workers themselves as well. So, when you're looking at this, there's several different tier levels of, I've assumed the red means 30 seconds. Is that right, Marvetta? No. What does the red mean? I'm done?
Yes.
Can I just take 20 more seconds? Is that okay? I promise I won't go too over line, but I did want to, just as we're dealing with it, we have to deal with COVID first, in my opinion, in order to deal with the remaining issues that are associated with it. I will stop there. Thank you.
No, thank you. Mrs. Smith, same question.
I'm sorry, Zubeen, if I could just jump right in real quickly. Just as a reminder, the white actually means you're about the 30-second in mark, and the red is, okay, all right, thank you.
I apologize, I wasn't looking, I didn't see the white, so I'll keep my eye on you, Marvetta. Sorry, I was looking at
that's okay.
So sorry about that.
Thank you, Rev Kaufer.
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, what do you think is important to help families and young children to operate effectively in this environment?
Hi, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This conversation is so important. I am also the child of public school teachers. Both of my parents were public school teachers, so I am very acutely aware of how important education is. And there is certainly a safety issue, but I think that safety issue can be turned into another opportunity to learn. There is no doubt that in younger years, 3 to 5, children's brains are creating pathways and are learning things at the highest rate they will ever in their life. So while we are all trying to learn how to do this correctly, we should also be trying to instill that in them an awareness of what's going on and awareness of how to learn, how to be safe. I believe that to recover from COVID-19 and to involve everyone in COVID-19, it needs to be a multi-step approach. A lot of children are not even in, as you mentioned, a lot of children are not even in programs right now. So for that, I would suggest a hybrid of some being in programs, but also home visits as well. As we mentioned, parents have been juggling home care and child care, and I think the home visits would especially be helpful in this kind of issue, in this pandemic, specifically because I work with Luzerne County, and I also teach children as well. I start at 4 years old and all the way through high school. And one of the things I've noticed in Luzerne County is that while we have had the pandemic, our PFAs, our protection from abuse orders, have gone up, but our referrals to children and youth have gone down. So no one is really talking about this, but there is no doubt that there's a problem that we're not seeing our children in our community. So I think one of the most important steps here needs to be a home visit so that we can see our children in our community and ensure they are safe as well as learning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. As we lead into our second question, using the last fiscal year as our base, since it was pre-pandemic, approximately 32,000 children were enrolled in state-funded, high-quality pre-K. However, that number stands in stark contrast to the nearly 102,000 eligible children in rural, suburban, and urban communities without the access to high-quality, publicly funded programs. Ms. Smith, what are your thoughts on the importance of high-quality pre-K for our children, and how can Pennsylvania significantly increase funding slots for families and these early learners?
Well, I think it is obviously extraordinarily important to get all of the children who are eligible into programs such as these. And I think that there are revenue sources here that we have not even explored. For example, Pennsylvania is the only natural gas state that does not have a natural gas extraction tax, and the 120th does not have a volume by pipeline tax. Similarly, closing the Delaware loophole would add to our available funds of revenue. Moreover, specifically when talking about children, on average for a school, Pennsylvania spends about $14,000 a year per child in school. But by contrast, in our juvenile justice system, we spend $160,000 per child in the juvenile justice system, which is more than 10 times the amount. I mean, that means we are spending more than 10 times the amount of money we are to educate them, to punish them, than we are to educate them. And I believe that if we took some of that money and reinvested it in those areas where there are eligible children in those rural areas and reinvested it in early childhood education, we would not need it on the back end. So there's revenue sources here that we have not looked into, and there's revenue that we have that we can probably spend more effectively and point that towards early childhood education, because I truly believe, and the science shows, that when you have very good early childhood education, pre-K, those students have a higher rate of graduation, they have a lower rate of incarceration, they have a higher rate of employment. There are only benefits to them, and that turns into benefits for us and the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Representative Kaufer, the same question. What are your thoughts on the importance of high quality pre-K for our children, and how can Pennsylvania significantly increase funding slots for families and these early learners?
Yeah, I want to echo some of the statements that Joanna just said, and that was in regard to the extraction tax and combined reporting to the Delaware loophole. There are definitely some, I serve on our tax modernization subcommittee. That is one of the opportunities that we have to bring in additional revenue, cyber charter reform being another one. But, we, as I'm sure you know, that we've had a lot of growth in our economy over the last number of years. And since being in office, I think we've increased at roughly $200 million the increase in pre-K counts, Head Start, and the Head Start supplemental, as well as early intervention programs. About $120 million to pre-K, to about $25 million to Head Start, and $75 million to early intervention programs. So, on top of this, as we're looking at making these investments, we have to make sure that we're not stunting the growth as we go forward, because that has led to our investments of historic natures. I think everybody on this call would agree that they've been historic increases that we have made in our line items, from roughly 300 million up to over $500 million that we have made annually in our state budget. We know that according to the first 5 years fund, that for every dollar invested, that there's about $7.30 in return that we have. So the investment of what we're making on the front end is really important to what the impacts are on the back end of our budget. And hang on, I don't see Marvetta. So if she's holding up a thing, oh, okay. I just realized I'm talking and I didn't see her. So now, okay, thank you. We've also allocated, as we know, about of COVID funding, over $100 million early childhood. I think it was 116 million, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. But there's an amazing thing that happens when we talk about kids entering the first grade, knowing their ABCs, knowing how to spell their name, some of those basic things of making them a lifelong learner. If we can make sure that they're hitting their marks and not falling behind on where kids are in their appropriate age bracket, you're not making that differentiation of people and making that gap grow even more. So the high quality education piece that you're talking about is making sure that people are going to continue that lifelong learner process. So, I know that there's also money. I didn't see a note from Marvetta yet, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, you got some.
You did? I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, sorry.
No.
May I offer a brief response to that?
No, Ms. Smith, we aren't doing a response and a debate style conversation, but thank you.
No, thank you.
If it's Representative Kaufer, I will pose this question to you. Prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the need for high quality childcare outweighed the supply, with only 43% of licensed childcare capacity meeting high quality standards. In addition, the number of childcare providers had declined over the past 5 years. As you know, the state subsidized childcare program, Childcare Works, helps working families defray the cost of childcare. However, the state subsidy rates do not cover the cost of high quality care. What measures would you support to address this gap in payment and shortage of access to high quality childcare for working families, especially for infant and toddler programs?
So I want to address one quick issue here that I think is important as well. Is I've been hearing from different business owners as well that are having a hard time with the process with Ocdel right now on getting their licensing set up and trying to actually open their businesses. So I've heard that myself, of people who have submitted paperwork trying to get their businesses open and not getting them a very quick turnaround. And I know that there's a lot of issues going on with COVID right now, that not everybody's working from an office and able to turn around that paperwork. But have heard some of those concerns in regard to this. But getting to the gap in payment, as you talked about, one of the things that I'm very proud of that was signed into law, one of my first bill signed into law, was in regard to addressing the benefits cliff. It was House Bill 1322 and signed into law in December 2015. And it included addressing the child care subsidy with a benefits cliff that we have in Pennsylvania. And we allowed more people to qualify. As people made $12.75 an hour, they were able to receive a full child care subsidy if they were working. As soon as somebody made $13 an hour, they lost the entire subsidy. They couldn't. So as you made an extra quarter an hour, your quality of life was going down because your increase in pay didn't make up for what you lost in the cost of expenditures to pay now out of pocket for child care. So we actually streamlined that process, that it went out so it wasn't all or nothing, but a streamlined process that as you made a little more, you picked up a little at the tab and streamed it all the way up beyond the $21 mark, where people actually recouped the cost of what their additional earnings were. So if we are looking at our TANF programs and leveraging more federal dollars through matching funds and resources, through our MOEs and things like that, that can bring in these additional dollars. Thank you. I saw it, Marvetta, that when we have 200% of federal poverty income guidelines is what qualifies you for these programs, we've now allowed it to go up to 235%. But there's even more of this disparity of working class individuals who don't have access as well beyond this. So we need to really overhaul this system as a whole, in my opinion, and I think we can do a better job of making sure that we can leverage those additional dollars, because there's about $6 billion out there at the Fed, with 3.5 from the CARES funding that is through September 2021. Thanks, Marvetta. I saw it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, the same question. I'll rephrase it for you. What measures would you support to address this gap in payment and shortage of access to high quality childcare for working families, especially for our infant and toddler programs?
Going back to the child care subsidy in 2015, in 2015 until 2019, the funding fell short, and in fact was cut by nearly $42 million in this period. And of the children that were eligible for the child care work subsidy, 120,430 families that were eligible, about 78% of those went unserved. And only 37% of them were able to cover the costs with that subsidy for a high quality program. So obviously the program that has been in place that Representative Kaufer was talking about is not cutting it and is not making it happen. I would again suggest that we need to look into different resources, into different revenues, and look for federal matching funds, like closing the Delaware loophole, like instituting a natural gas extraction tax, or a volume by pipeline tax. Economically speaking, we pay, in a free market, we pay people what society thinks they're worth. And unfortunately, teachers don't get paid what they are absolutely worth. And if we don't walk away from this pandemic with a whole new appreciation of teachers and how much work they actually do and how much work they exactly do, I don't know what. But we need to be paying them more. We need to be looking into those additional programs, and we need to revamp the entire system that we have now, as I mentioned, because it has only been cut in the years that Representative Kaufer has been in office, and 78% of children who were able to were not being served at all. So we need to look to different revenues like I've mentioned.
Okay, all right, thank you. I know we had something sent in from the audience, so I will put it out to both of you and ask this question. Pennsylvania has increased pre-K counts, but at the same time has reduced state funds for childcare, which erodes the infrastructure for pre-K and also reduces the amount of care for infants and toddlers. So the question is, what are your thoughts on that? Ms. Smith, do you want to start off?
Sure. I think that's a travesty. I know that that has happened, but as we have discussed here on this call, we all know the science is clear that pre-K is the most important part of learning. Once you begin to create those synapses in your brain, they are created at a higher rate than they ever will be again in your life, and they are created at a stronger rate than they ever will be again in your life. To me, education is the answer to most of our problems. If we make the investment for pre-education, then our kids are getting educated, which is always a plus. But also, if you think about it holistically in a community way, what's the first thing people ask when they move to a new area? Anybody? I know somebody knows.
Yeah.
What are the schools like, right? So if we can make sure that our pre-K education is an excellent education, if we can make sure that we can fund that and make sure all of the children who can be eligible and are eligible get services, and if we can really get our school funding in order, we create a whole new opportunity for our community, especially the 120th. Like I said, number one, our kids are getting educated. Then people want to move here because we have good school districts and we have good education programs, which brings in more businesses, which brings in new businesses, which brings in new people to work in those new businesses and creates a better economy. But it starts, I have every faith that it starts with education, specifically pre-K.
All right, thank you. Representative Kaufer, do you have some thoughts to add?
Yeah, I'll get to that issue. I just want to comment quickly. I agree that we are not getting to a high enough percentage of people that this needs to get to. Obviously, we've been increasing that funding. I'm looking at the numbers that we have. I pulled it up here. When I came into office, we were spending about $373 million a year. Last year, we spent $595 million, an increase of over $200 million, $220 million roughly of the amount that we've been spending in this. And that's a credit to Governor Wolf, as well as the legislature working together to increase that funding. So it's been a bipartisan effort that I think both the governor is very proud of, as well as myself. But Getting back to the question that you were asking about, that a lot of those dollars is in regard to Medicaid expansion and the drawdown on additional dollars. Because of, once again, getting back to those MOE issues of where we spend our dollars and what we're able to bring down additionally, that has covered some of those costs of what you're talking about, of the state sort of moving money around from one program because of receiving additional dollars from federal programs on the other. I agree with the heart of what this is getting at, that in the past years, it has not met what the need is. And I agree with that, because we've had issues as well with the overspend of the dollars that we've had allocated in our budget. It's been a big issue, in my opinion, where there is money allocated in a specific amount put into a budget line item, and then the amount that has been put in there is overspent by the governor and the budget secretary, and then the legislature has been forced to backfill that money. I think that that is an issue that we've had for a number of years now, of trying to make sure when we budget and the legislature passes a budget and it's signed into law, that is not give somebody the ability to then shift money around from one line item to another. That happened with our autism wait list waiver programs, and the money that we had that was dedicated for that, where money was just overspent during several of the budget years and not spent appropriately. That has to deal a lot with this money that we're talking about, of where we are now trying to draw down additional MOE dollars with some of the Medicaid funding and healthcare funding and childcare funding. And I do know what you're talking about, and that is sort of at the heart of the problem here, that I know will be a big part of this discussion as we go into, beyond this 5-month budget that ends in November.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for addressing the audience's question. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hnasko. She has the next question, and please, Amy, share a little bit about where you stand on the importance of early childhood education.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. I really appreciate it. So as Zubeen said, I'm Dr. Amy Hnasko. I work in the undergrad teacher preparation program for P4 certification at Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre. And I started there 3 years ago, specifically to begin a program that was looking for alternative pathways for people to earn that bachelor's certification. The traditional college pathway isn't accessible to many people, especially those working full-time in childcare facilities. So I have been working for the last 3 years to create an online, part-time, accessible pathway that's supported by scholarships through the Teach Fund, but also we're trying to solicit other donors to have it be a really accessible and affordable pathway. I work really closely with wonderful childcare facilities like Zubeen, and I'm very lucky to have some of her teachers in the program. So I have a passion for this. I was a pre-K and a kindergarten teacher for a number of years. I actually began my career as a childcare teacher, so I'm very close and wanting all of the things that we're talking about today to be so much better and so much more supported. So a real passion for that work. So as you have heard throughout the conversation, and I'm sure you would agree, early care and education staff are essential, and they're providing critical supports for family and children. However, this sector is plagued by low wages, and as a result of those low wages, typically a high turnover rate. The United Way of Pennsylvania found that the average compensation for childcare workers is only $9.74 an hour. The Children Matter Action Fund partners know that many providers lose their staff to places like Target and fast food chains because that's the competing wage with the $9.74. So the question is, what are your ideas about how to adequately compensate and improve the retention of qualified professionals to educate children? I don't know if I'm supposed to throw it out to one or the other.
Ms. Smith, would you like to start off the conversation?
Sure. We absolutely need to adequately pay our teachers. As I mentioned before, economically speaking, our society pays people what they think they're worth. And our teachers and our pre-K teachers are worth so much more than we are paying. I've mentioned quite a few other economic revenue streams that might be available that we should be looking into. And I would also mention that if we pay them a higher wage, I mean, my parents were both teachers. I remember my parents, my dad always had to have a second job. And I now have friends who are doing the same thing. And they pay constantly for their own classroom supplies. They pay constantly to put projects together out of their own pocket, which takes even more money away from them. People who are teachers are not teachers for their good health. They do it because they believe in it and they want to do this. And that deserves to be compensated correctly. So I've already mentioned different revenue streams and specifically looking into revenue that we already have that could be reallotted in a more constructive way. But there is no question that education and economic opportunities are inextricably intertwined, and we have to support and nurture both of them in order for our society to function to its full potential. That means we have to also nurture educational opportunities. There is no question that we need to pay our teachers a higher wage, a living wage. And with that, we would be able to keep good staff members and retain those good staff members. I mean, it requires degrees, it requires certifications to be, and specialty knowledge to be an educator, to be a pre-K educator. Those degrees, those additional education requirements should be, I lost the timekeeper, should be also rewarded. And like I said, there are certainly revenues that we have not looked into, but I would say that education would be the most important because there is no loss. Nobody loses when we pay our teachers a living wage, and that enables us to retain good teachers, to retain good early childhood educators, and to ensure that our children are learning at the correct ages and are learning when their brain is growing the most. And that's my answer to that.
Thank you. No, thank you for sharing that. Representative Kaufer, I can repeat the question. What are your ideas about how to adequately compensate and improve the retention of qualified professionals to educate children?
Thank you, Zubeen. And first of all, Dr. Hnasko, and I hope I'm saying that right, that sounds like a fantastic program with the amount that is changing right now in regard to education and people being certainly thriftier with their education as they're going through, and especially offering those types of programs. I'm very interested. I'd love to follow up with you on a separate time to talk more about that and some partnerships that we can do. But let me address the question that you asked. And that was in regard to, I believe that you said it was $9.74 an hour that childcare workers are, on average, are making. And that is no doubt not a living wage. And that there has been legislation out there of us trying to work together to raise the minimum wage, to addressing some of the business concerns that are associated with it in regard to some of the overtime regulations and things like that as a combination bill to move that forward. That's been something that, I had worked on with the governor and some other, in our business community and others to try to get that issue addressed. But the biggest part of the issue, and there's, in my opinion, that we don't treat these early childhood education workers like professionals. They are professionals, and we need to treat them as such. We're entrusting these people to look over and watch our children. And so, we have way too much turnover, and you were addressing the issue of people being able to make as much or more money shifting into a lower skill position than what we have with entrusting our children to people to look over them. So we need an overhaul of our system in general, and that includes a balancing out of our human services programs with the wages of workers, because it's a travesty that people should be working a full-time job, 40 hours a week, making $9.74, and still need to collect welfare benefits. That's terrible in our system right now. So we need to get at addressing that, and that takes a complete overhaul of looking at what we're doing. I'm going to put it back on you guys because of something that I saw during my time in office that I found to be particularly effective, was legislation that Gene DiGirolamo came by doing a study with our direct care workers in the human services world and the impact of what increasing their wages through costs of their subsidies that we have at the state level, and the lowering that it would actually do of our Medicaid and other human services programs that we have in the state. So if we are able, that was a very effective study in my opinion that showed, and I don't remember the exact amount, if we invested, I think it was $100 million into increasing the wages for direct care workers, we actually saved, I think it was $400 or $500 million. I think if we were to have the numbers and statistics to be able to back that up, which the numbers were, I see the red flag, that that would be an effective way of how we can also try to address that legislatively.
Wow, I appreciate the energy and the passion with that, because being in this industry, we need more voices like that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to turn it over to Lindsay Griffin with our final question for our conversation. So Lindsay, would you like to share your thoughts on the importance of early childhood education and your question with the candidates?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you again. I know from Wico and myself, we very much appreciate being part of this conversation today. It's so important. I mean, the importance of when we talk about education and childhood and this early development, it's really what we know now is critical to that healthy workforce, which is what a healthy community is now. So it's become, so incredibly relevant. And what I really love today about being on this with all of you today is we have, partners like Zubeen, and I see Lynn Bigg is on here as well from that early stage, that first part of development, which we know is so critical to Ginny Crake from Junior Achievement, who has become a critical partner in all of Northeastern PA. We know it's an organization around the world, but Ginny, what she does with really taking those kids in that K through 12 to that next step of developing them. We know this is when they're getting these skill sets and deciding their futures and their careers and where they're going to go. To Dr. Amy at Wilkes, who that next phase of this higher education, whatever path that should be for these kids. So I love that we're really starting to align all these different stages of the process of developing our area. And like I said, I think it's just so critical to having all these conversations and everyone in place in the community and, all throughout our country, frankly, but seeing how everyone's starting to work together on the critical parts of the development process. And I know from our perspective and why Wico really, and I really want to be a part of this today, is we know how critical that is to when we talk about building a healthy economy here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. I mean, this is the steps to that workforce, is that we're building it all throughout the way, and that's really what's going to get us a healthy community, which we strive towards. So I just again want to thank everyone for allowing us to be here with you today and for participating in this, because we just find all these aspects so incredibly critical to the work that we do. So we thank you all as well for what you're doing towards that. So returning a little bit to childcare. A recently released state report by the Keystone Economic Development and Workforce Command Center emphasized that access to and availability of providers are two major childcare challenges for employers and job seekers. And it's particularly important when companies are considering expanding or possibly relocating to an area, something that we see very often when we have people considering this area for possible sites. Further, this report spoke to the need for childcare on weekends and for workers on second and third shifts. Can you share your thoughts on childcare access and economic growth, as we know both are so completely related? So I don't know if we want to start with Representative Kaufer on this one.
Yeah, can I just ask one quick question? Zubeen, did you say this was our last question? I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about some of the other visiting programs or not.
It is our last question, and then we can have some final thoughts from each of you, if that's okay.
That'd be great. I'll save those remarks for then. So, one of the things, in this regard, we're seeing this changing in Luzerne County currently of what you're talking about. I mean, we had a very nice article in the newspaper recently about what Chris Hackett is doing at I2M, actually setting up conference rooms for people who are going back to work to have their kids be able to be in an environment where they can learn and make sure they're in safekeeping. I mean, you're seeing the businesses already organically starting to address this, recognizing the issue of when parents don't know what they're going to do with their kids and not showing up on time for work, missing days because they don't have someone to watch their kids, or to make sure that somebody's going to be with them if they're on a Zoom platform or something along those lines for education. So I applaud people like Chris Hackett taking that step forward and saying, we recognize this is an issue and we as an employer are going to address this. Beyond this, it's a real issue. I witnessed it You know, I used to work overnight shifts at Mohegan Sun in their marketing department. And one of my coworkers, you know, when she used to get out of work, you know, she would pick up her kids, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes if she was getting out earlier, she'd be picking up her kids at 10, 12 o'clock at night, you know, just to get the child care. And her concern of who's going to pick them up. Where are they today? Are they at the YMCA? Are at the CYC? You know, listing those concerns from coworkers. But, you know, you're talking about the effect in the combination with businesses and this recognition of the need that the effect it has on the economy and the need for businesses to address this. So I think there's opportunities beyond this to recognize. We all know that early childhood education leads to a growing economy. On top of that, I think there's opportunities. We've seen a lot with OSTC, EITC programs of what we can do to also expand those programs to get more money of direct investment from our businesses in our community to put money into these types of programs. So if we can take the programs that we already know our business owners know that works to help get education, additional education funding back into our communities, that we can get that money directed towards early education and be able to expand these programs and directly connect the economic benefits with the educational benefits for early childhood education. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, your thoughts?
Thank you. And as this is the last question, I want to say thank you again for having me. There is no question about the access to business and economic growth being intertwined with this. As I said, education and economic opportunities are inextricably intertwined, and we have to nurture both of them. I would like to see us, the Commonwealth specifically, work with businesses to create in-house childhood daycares, childhood educational pre-K educational systems. And I find that would benefit both the employer and the employee. While the Commonwealth might at first have to create incentives like a tax credit to do this, but in reality, the incentives will show themselves if an employer has a program that is for pre-K, that is a good program that helps with learning, that is focused on learning. Those incentives will eventually show themselves. It will help them retain their employees. It will help them find good employees who want to work there because that is such a benefit. And then those children are there in the same building, in the same area with their parents, and there is no question about who's watching them, what time am I getting out of work, what time is the pre-K program over. I think a huge step forward that we can make here is really trying to partner with businesses in creating pre-K education programs and daycares in the businesses. And again, I think that those ideals and those ideas have their own incentives, both for the parents, for the Commonwealth, for the children being able to learn and being close to their parents, and as well for the employer. It makes business sense as well. I'd like to see that happen, and I'd like to see us work towards that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As we've come to the closure of our conversation, I would like just thoughts from Representative Kaufer and Ms. Smith on just some closing remarks. So we have allotted about a minute's time. So Representative Kaufer, if you can share your thoughts as we close our conversation today.
Okay, I will try to be quick. Thank you again for having this panel. And I just saw your comment, Lynn, and I couldn't agree more with you about treating our workers as professionals. But I did want to just tie in some of the visiting programs that I don't think we had a chance to really talk about today. Nurse-family partnerships really in our area. You know, I had the pleasure of going on and visiting one of these programs. And one of the things that, once again, I think we're doing pretty well in our state is that we have a model, in my opinion, that is being followed both at the federal level. I think we are a national model for what we're doing in this. You know, I've been reading a lot about our maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program that we have been able to do. And I really hope that we are able to expand upon that. I know we've done, last year we increased that by $5 million in our budget up to $16.5 million. $5 million in 1 year I know that there's still a need for another $10 million to get to at least 1,600 more children, but those are the real numbers that we're talking about. Beyond this, I think this is a very helpful conversation. I think it's very much a need, and appreciate that the Chamber is willing to host something and be part of this as part of our hosts because of the recognition of how these go together. So thank you to everybody who's out there. Thank you to everybody who's working. I know this is stressful times, and thank you for what you're doing to help make our community a little bit better. We appreciate it. I can't thank you enough, and know that you're dealing with a lot of stress out there right now. And thank you for striving through this and working hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, would you like to share some thoughts?
Of course. Thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you so much for having me and having this conversation. This is arguably one of the most important conversations we can have for the future of the Commonwealth. And while we have so many good programs out there, the fact is we know that there are a lot of children, of eligible children, who do not have access. 60% of eligible children do not have access to pre-K counts. And while we have seen the budget grow, there have been circumstances during which we have also seen a lot of these investments cut. And what I would like to see for the future is to not cut these investments. Sometimes if you want to get money out of something, you have to put money into something. And I believe that there are very few other places where money could be better spent than investing in our pre-K education and our educational system. When we do that, everyone wins. Our kids are getting educated, which is always a plus. The most important thing to a democracy is an educated electorate. And then we bring people to the area. People want to live here if we have good school districts, if we have teachers who are paid correctly and treated as professionals. I think education is the route to where we need to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I always believe that awareness starts from a conversation. So this was a lot of content in a short period of time, but thank you, both of you, for showing your passion and your dedication to bringing this out to the forefront. And I wanted to thank Wico and our grass top leaders for participating this morning, for your time and your voice in this matter. So thank you. And if we can keep the thread of importance and relevance of the high quality early childhood education, then I think we can ensure a stable and thriving community. So let's keep continuing on with this. I know Marvetta has a lot more planned out throughout the year. So let's all hope we can all participate and make sure we bring awareness to this. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm just going to jump in and say, echo the thanks also to our candidates, to our program presenters, certainly to the members of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as our professor from Wilkes University, and Junior Achievement. Oh, that brings back so many memories. I remember my early Junior Achievement years, so it's just so good to have such a breadth of voices that have participated this morning. We just want to say thank you. We want to remind you that the childrenmatteractionfund.org website is available for your viewing. We do anticipate adding this recording to the Children Matter Action Fund YouTube channel, and we will let you know when that is up. We remind everyone in our listening audience, and certainly our program participants, to be prepared and ready to vote on November the 3rd if you have not done so in advance. Have a great rest of the week, and thank you so much, and goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.